Hey there, welcome to SharkCast Pod, a podcast dedicated to the greatest club in the history of the world, the mighty Cronulla Sharks. This show is brought to you by Dyson Logistics, the Royal Motor Yacht Club in Port Hacking, and Jason Hawes at Cripps & Cripps Real Estate. My name is Sam Shinazzi. I'm an OG from 2015. It's been 10 beautiful years of podcasting for this great audience of ours, the SharkCast land of thousands of people all across the globe. And we're here again for another episode. A big week coming up in Sharkland. A big game against the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Can't wait to dissect that. But before that, we need to tell you that we are on all the social medias. Jump on and follow us. If you want to get in touch with us, you can DM us. You can get in touch via sharkcastpod@gmail.com. We have merchandise out there. We got some winter gear if you want to get into it. You can find that at rugbyleaguemerch.com. But most importantly, we have a member of the bloodline. And he is returning home in many ways, which we may or may not get into. But we have a man who currently works for the big corporation that is basically in charge of everything that we love outside of the club, which is the NRL. He used to work at my workplace, Fox Sports. He used to work at the NBL. He's a baller. And he's my wise man. And later on in the episode, we're going to do a lot of talking about wise men and women and bloodlines, if you smell what the Shinazzi is cooking. But until we get there, please welcome, I think for the first time this year, if not last few months, Mr. Jardian Ormsby.
These intros are just insane. I love it. Thank you for having me back. My friend. I think this is the first time this year that I've been able to join. And before we get into any of that, I would just like to start off, Sam, by thanking you for that welcome, but also by acknowledging you as my tribal chief in this space. Again, another reference that I think people will get it, will understand a little bit more towards the end of that episode. This episode.
I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but if you are the wise man, then maybe I am the tribal chief. I never thought of myself as that. I thought I was more, Solo Sokoa or something. But great to have you back, Jards.
Thank you.
Tell me, how the heck are you, my friend?
Things at the NRL are fantastic. Vegas in particular. Let's start with Vegas. So Vegas occupied a little bit of my headspace for a little while there. And I'm not on the ground in Vegas as much as other departments around me are on the ground. So being in the digital department and being the head of product at the NRL, but really probably makes more sense if I say the head of digital product at the NRL. We're not really needed at all the events the way that some of the events team and some of the marketing teams are needed to be there. But by all accounts, everyone in the building, when we were starting this thing off, like from January onwards, it was just all pedal to the metal around Vegas. And seeing the reaction to Vegas, seeing photos. We were actually doing some of the in-stadium promotions in my digital team. We were operating, or at least we were coordinating what was being seen on the big screen in Vegas, back here from Sydney. So we worked with many partners. And for at least a good 3 to 4 weeks in the lead into that, Sam, I felt as this is as close as getting into a war room as I feel like I've ever been. Just making sure that Vegas worked. And I think that the way it was received was positive. And, my hope is that one day, our beloved black, white, and blue will get their opportunity to go over there. I have no insights into how those decisions are made, so I'm allowed to, I guess, talk about that stuff. So, because it would be a great opportunity. And by all means, when I would talk to different people, different fans who had went, one of my best mates, actually, he's a Melbourne Storm fan. He wasn't even a fan of any of the 4 teams that were there. And he just said the vibe in Vegas was unreal. So that's now out of the way. All stars are out of the way. We're a month in and everything is good. Thanks for asking.
So on Vegas, 2 things. I've got a friend, an Australian friend who's been living in America for, 15, 20 years. Not a fan of any of the 4 teams. Main love is Premier League. He said to me, and he had no reason to really say it, that it was an absolute success from a local person living there point of view. He lives in just outside of the strip or whatever. And he said it was fantastic. He's in the tech world, big, very well-known website builder for the last 20 years. And he said it was, from a local point of view, really successful. The other point of interest is many Sharks members who listen to the show, and hopefully everyone is a member. If not, I know a lot of our listeners are members. They would have got an email of interest from the club about going to Vegas if we were selected to go. And it was a little bit late in the picture. They sent it out, I think, on the Thursday, and I think the deadline was for the Friday for this club to get their pitch in. But obviously, they just wanted to gauge some interest. And I think next year, Jardian, and I have less knowledge than what you do, I think we're a slim chance. I think the fact that the American dudes are behind us now in Vegas, the guys who are involved with casinos and all that kind of thing, the new benefactors, I think that helps. And I think that our fan base is one of the smaller ones in the NRL, but we've shown that we do travel to places like Magic Round and we take games elsewhere and we travel. We may not travel to the SFS or the Cogra, but we'll go to Coffs Harbour, we'll go to the Gold Coast. You know what I mean? So I do think we're a chance, but I think they've already announced Penrith. I think there'll be possibly the Warriors. I think there'll be a Queensland team for TV, which leaves one other team. And I think there's a chance, but I probably realistically think it'll be 2 to 3 years' time. Hope I'm wrong. I want to go. I'd love to go. But yeah, just thought I'd touch on that.
So was your response to that survey, Sam, with that, yes, if we are selected, I will be on that plane?
It was a hell yes.
I love it. We're so in theme today. Yeah, look, one of the things that I can talk about Vegas was that in the lead up, and I'm talking about the late lead up to it, there was a last minute push to really drive last minute ticket sales inside the chartered plane that the NRL had organized, right? So this mattered. So I assume that one of the things that the logo will look at when it comes to deciding who's going to go, which 4 teams will be there next season, will be which 4 teams are most likely to help us sell out these chartered planes that we have arranged there. And that, at least I suspect that was part of the reason that survey may have gone out, is that perhaps there was an indication from the logo, from the league, that they had said to clubs. And again, I don't know any of this, so I'm just speculating at the moment. But like, hey, like if you can really indicate to us that we won't have that difficult a time pitching to your fans to come along and join us and help us fill out what is described as an amazing stadium over there, then let's do it. And you're right, the Sharks do travel very well. We have data on that at the NRL. It is used in some regards to determine who goes where in Magic Round, like on what particular day and whether or not you're even there. Now that we have an extra team and there's someone who has to have a bye, that's always, a really tough process to try and figure out which team misses out on Magic Round. But stuff like that, data points like that around traveling, they're important. So I'm glad that the club proactively got out on the front foot of that, because it would be great for the story of our club to say that, yeah, we were over there in Vegas. We did that. We are one of the teams that had the opportunity to do that. So if my math is right, it's a 5-year Vegas thing. There will be opportunities for 20 teams. Obviously, some teams will go back a couple of times in order to fill out that 20 quota. Whether or not that means every team gets to go once, don't know. We'll figure it out. I did see a little bit of dialogue around the Panthers and Eels and how it just makes a lot of sense for them to go over there. I don't, again, I'm not at the table, so I don't understand exactly the logic behind all of these things. But I think the only thing I would say to that, Sam, is that it can sometimes be a little bit tricky to take a derby that is going to sell out back home and really inject some cash flow. It's tricky to take that away from teams and to put that in Vegas, where that's a little bit hard. So whilst it would be good and quite the theatrical spectacle, I do wonder if I'm the Panthers and I'm being told, oh, sorry, we're going to take your local game away to Vegas, or if I'm the Eels and I'm being told, oh, sorry, we're not at CommBank this year, we're taking it to Vegas, I'm probably like, can we go there but play against someone else so that we're not losing out on those gates?
And also the idea, if you're trying to sell to the Americans, generally, you're going to get expats. But let's be realistic. To a local Californian, the derby rivalry between Para and Penrith means nothing. You can say these guys hate each other. Okay, that'll gauge interest, but it's not really a selling point. The Western Sydney derby.
Yeah,
I don't think.
That's a good point. It's a good point that you raise. And another spin-off from this conversation is well, what happened? What would happen if maybe we brought over teams whose mascots are in line with some of the big mascots over in America? What if you brought the Canberra Raiders to the stadium of the Las Vegas Raiders? What happens if we did take the Broncos there this year, but what if you brought all these other teams in who had similar names? And maybe that works, maybe that doesn't work. I probably don't feel like I'm going to go down the road and watch the San Jose Sharks if they come here just because they're called the Sharks, but maybe it's different over there. We'll find out. But all in all, a good event that kind of kickstarted what so far I think has been a pretty good start to the season.
Yeah, it's been a fun one. I think the games have been pretty good. The tries have been spectacular. I mean, we've seen possibly already in 5 rounds probably the greatest try in the history of the game, as far as we all know, the last 30 years at least, and
one of the best try savers in the game with the chase down like that.
Yes,
just I do genuinely believe that those are the two best. Those are the best offensive and defensive plays that I've seen in like the last 10 years at least.
Yeah.
Outside of Andrew Fafita trying the 2016 grand final, of course.
And we should give the Big Bop a mention because we're both big admirers of his. You know him on a personal level. I know him through the Sharks. Our listeners know him as the hero that saved the day for us, along with Ricky Latelli. But he's doing a school clinic, a school holidays clinic, I should say, next week. And it's down in the Woolooware area. You can look it up online. If you have access to Instagram, Big Andrew Fafita's on there. It's the quickest way to find out what he's doing. But he's basically doing his own school holidays clinic for league loving kids of different ages and sort of talents. But it's basically just all in with Fafita, have some fun, throw the ball around. He'll teach you a few things. And we love Andrew, so we thought he'd give him a shout out here. We've been doing it a bit on Instagram as well. So love the Big Bop. Jards, we are primarily here to talk about WrestleMania, but around that, we're going to talk about the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks, who sit in 4th place after 5 rounds, 3 wins, 1 loss, 1 bye. We really should be 4 wins. We're not. We recognize that. There are reasons why we're not. We admit that. But I would like to talk to you initially about your thoughts on where you see the club at on the field after 4 games, 5 rounds.
Well, on the ladder, and in terms of our record, it is exactly what I thought it would be at this point of the season. But I thought that 1 loss was going to be in round 1 to the Warriors, and not in Leichhardt to the Tigers. So in that regard, it's good. Like, we can't really. You're going to get bad results. I do wonder how much I need to read into that whole Leichhardt game. Like, I do believe that there are just throwaway games even amongst the best of teams that we've seen in the history of the game. But at the same time, like, if you really want to establish yourself as one of those elite teams, you take care of business in games that crowds are going to try and cheer you out of, that vibes will want to hand to your opponent. Champions that I've seen in the past who are really clinical and methodical about what they do don't allow the moment or the fans on a hill to dissuade you out of there. And there was a lot of emotion there that night. It really felt as though the players had made a pact with Benji that they were not going to let him down there that night. That's just the way that the game unfolded and all of that. And then the start of the Raiders game was a little bit concerning as well, plenty concerning. they did what they needed to do to course correct. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall at halftime when Fitz spoke to the boys in the shed there, because by halftime we'd already gotten ourselves back into the game, so there was potential that he would have just said, carry on and do what you do. But they needed a rocket up them of sorts, and they brought it home. They brought home a good result. I have been satisfied with what I've seen out of the team. There are some players in there who I believe are playing out of their skin, and there are some players there who I think, well, let's give them a little bit of time to show us what they've got here. I know when we did our preseason or our Christmas wish list, it's very rare that we ever get through that list without mentioning Blake Brayley's name. But I think in what we've seen out of this season, some of the dialogue that we had in that session has proven to be true. And not that it was rocket science, but when he takes control of a game, we will not lose. We cannot lose. And he has had moments this season where he has looked absolutely phenomenal there.
So, two things on that, Jards. You probably haven't caught up yet, and a lot of our listeners may or may not have caught up, but overnight we released some interviews that I did with the Sharks this week with Will Kennedy, Blake Brayley, and Teague Wilton. And I asked all three of them about Leichhardt, and I also asked them what was happening behind the post at 18-0. So go have a listen to that when you have time. It's about 20 minutes in total. And also, speaking to Blake, I discussed straight away up front with him about the change in attitude and the improved performance. And he addressed that. And to summarize, he basically said it's an attitude thing. And then it's a case of when you run on the field, living up to that attitude. Because it wasn't so much he didn't have those beliefs and thoughts for the last 5 years. It's more he's realized he wants to go places in his career, both with the team and on a personal level. So I think you're right. I think, and I actually mentioned you in the episode yesterday. I said, you're the one who really drives the fact that when Blake's going good, the Sharks are going to have the ultimate success. So you're spot on there. And it's up to him now to have that consistency, because it's all very well to say, well, he's been good in 3 out of the 4 games, but we need 25,
That's that's always been the challenge. I don't know. I can't think of a season where we haven't seen glimpses from Blake of potential brilliance there. But stitching it together for 25 games and then a final series, that's something that I think we haven't seen yet consistently. And I, touch wood, this might be the season where that is all coming together. So I've been impressed by that. I've been impressed by a few of the younger players in the team as well who have coming through. I think we're seeing first graders come through. I was a little bit worried last year, and I think I mentioned this on the podcast a couple of times, that sometimes when you wrap up so many players, the need to impress can occasionally be found wanting. I'm not saying that people got comfortable because they knew that they were going to be at the club for the next 2-3 years, and they knew that their outside partner on either side of them were going to be there with them as well. But seeing the young people come through and some of the effort that's been put in, we have some real talent ready to emerge that will keep every single person who's on contract on their toes. And it's been great to see. We're going to talk about it later, but Tooks, I've been super impressed by some of our bigs. Obviously, Big Tommy Harrison is someone that I just continue to grow in awe of in terms of the contribution that's given. Reminds me a little bit of, need I say it, the Luke Douglas type player. Absolutely. Where you're not necessarily going to get all the plaudits, but is always going to be just a reliable source of give me the ball, here's 10 meters, carry on. And just physically is right there. So really love that about him. I'm excited by what I've seen, cautiously excited. But if there was something that has been not good, I know that we've got here what's been a little bit concerning. I guess I feel like I know a little bit less about Nico's game now than what I thought I did last year, which maybe we can get into there, because I sometimes don't know which version of Nico I'm going to get when I'm when I'm pulling into games. And there are two different versions of that, and multiple versions. And for the most part, it has been good, I feel. But when it's not, it's been a problem for us to put some points on the board.
Are you, so for example, say there's two sides. I know you're saying there's more, but say there's two sides. Are you talking at Leichhardt 3 out of 10, but then other games 8 out of 10, or are you talking stylistically? What are you getting at?
I probably talk about in terms of there's the version of him that is brilliant in his simplistic approach to the game, and then there's the side of his game that is occasionally trying to do too much, which is not necessarily about him alone. I think when he is trying to do too much, it's because he might need to, because he's not getting that support or the spark around him, so he feels as though he needs to take that on himself. But I'm not sure that we see the best version of him when he's doing that. And again, I don't want this to sound like a personal criticism, because I think on the whole, there's a reason he's towards the top of the Daily M points. I probably would have given him the same amount of points that he has now, but maybe at different games, for different games than the ones that he did get the points for. But I think he's probably there. And by all accounts, he just continues to be quite a humble servant of the game and of the team, and that is also to be credited, and something that makes me happy for him. So but that is the only thing that I can think of pressingly in terms of what's the one thing I'm not entirely sure about. I'm just not sure what versions of him I'm going to get every so often, whereas I kind of didn't worry about that last year or the year before, but this year I'm just like, oh, I'll occasionally ask myself.
So this year, based on the 4 games, I'm gonna defend him a little bit, because I think in 3 of the 4 games, he's kind of been really integral to the wins, especially in the second halves of games. But I don't think he's overplayed it. If you look at the West Tigers game, and I know we're harping on that a little bit, and there's a bit more to come, and I'm with you thinking that it's not going to be that important in the grand scheme of things. That game, particularly towards the end of the game, he just started freaking out and thought we needed points, but the game was done. But he just started to push passes, push kicks, and that was a bit of the frantic Nico that doesn't go right. Frantic good Nico is amazing. Frantic not good Nico, it's not amazing. It's kind of like, what's happening here? But I think this year, in my opinion, like look at the Warriors game, look at all the 3 wins. I think he's underplayed himself in the sense of not many try assists, nothing flash, but he's really steadied the ship. So he's played an important role, but I wouldn't, again, even say he's necessarily man of the match.
From what I've observed, Sam, the thing that I've been most impressed with here with Nico this season has actually been on the defensive end. There, like that's where I've been super impressed, and I love the development of his game in that regard. And no one's told me this, but I just assume that it's something that he's really worked on in the off season, and maybe there was a little bit of unfair criticism off the back of previous rep games where he may have gotten a bad rap for one missed tackle or something like that, and that has kind of fueled him to look at that. But he's been pretty phenomenal on that defensive side, and I would just like to see that be the case. All the great players of the game have to pass through that gauntlet of trying to figure out what we do and who I am and how I play when you're in those pressure cooker situations where everything is going against you. How do you respond? Do you respond in ways that are maybe not all too helpful to the grand picture and the grand plan of the team, or are you clinical and methodical about it? Do you bring things back to a simple is better and just consistently carry on? And that's what I guess we're going to find out over the next little bit, because I don't imagine that Leichhardt scenario that we faced will be the only one that we face this year. I think there's probably going to be a handful of games that we should absolutely win, and we're going to walk into stadiums with all the momentum, with the sports bet, or whoever giving us like $1.05 to win those games, and we're going to struggle. And that's where you really kind of need your top end of your team, your top brass, just taking the bull by the horns and saying, everyone settle down, everyone calm down. And maybe that's exactly what happened during the Raiders game, is that someone said there, hey, this isn't like hard. We're not doing that again. Everyone just relax and let's stay and think. And if they continue to do that, and if they do that, that will mean more to me in terms of how I feel about this team in September than any position that they have on the ladder will mean. How they respond to those absolute pressure cooker situations is what I'm interested in seeing over the next 10 weeks leading into Origin.
So there could be an upcoming game that might be like that in a few days. We'll see.
Yes.
I don't think we'll be $5, but I think we'll be favourites. And I think that whilst I think all the pressure is actually on South Sydney, literally, obviously we're going there to win and we can't lose. So I think we might experience that sooner rather than later. I want to ask you, who else is impressing you? I've got a feeling you're going to say Ronaldo Mulatalo.
Very impressed. Very impressed by Ronaldo. There are some times when I just wonder what the identity of our team would be if he wasn't there. If he wasn't out there, he seems to contribute just a whole lot more than the balls that he's planting down in those corner flags. Those corner flags. Being really, really impressed with him. I know there's some mail about maybe the way that Jesse has been playing this year, but I spoiler alert for that section of the episode, I actually think he's gone really well this season on the whole. It's hard for me not to have praise for our captain, Cam McInnes. We just look defensively a lot better when he's out there. And we'll get at when we talk about how I feel about Fitz. Maybe I'll just do it right now. I feel so positively about the way that our defense is starting to look and come together outside of that absolute pasting that we copped against the Tigers and the first 20 minutes against the Raiders. Defensively, we're starting to look like the team that Fitz had a reputation for assembling on the defensive side, which is in Sharks' DNA, is to be this gritty defensive team. And we, I think, and touch wood that I'm not jinxing anything, I feel like we've made a leap in that regard.
So on Fitz, I wanted your opinion on him. And for me, I mean, people know that I'm a fan of what he does, but I can now prove it by saying, look at the way we defended towards the end of the year. Look at the way we started the year. Okay, Leichhardt, go back and look at the tries. 1 to 2 were through bad defense. A bunch of others were either dummy half or from kicks, circumstantial. The Raiders game, they didn't score a genuine try against us until we were leading and they came back a little bit towards the end. The first 3 tries there wasn't much in them. So I don't think as a defense they fell apart. There might have been an individual error. There might have been a dummy half kind of thing, but I'm with you. The defense has improved out of sight. They're playing with the physicality that they haven't played with for a long time. I think guys like T. Wilton returning, just these tough hombres who don't take a backward step. Big Chuku's out there for short stints. Cam McInnes, as you said, like the fact that he's our starting lock, and there was some debate about whether he's going to be on the bench, should he play? Like Fitzgibbon has made the changes. Look at the team this week. He's kept Kale Iro there. Now, that wasn't a given. That was a decision he's made. And that may change when all the troops come back. He might go Talakai back out there. But the guy has shown, the coach has shown that he's obviously 24 hours a day thinking about what's best for the club, but also that he's open to change. He's not just going to sit on the same team. I think he kind of went through that last year and he pulled the trigger a bit too late, and he knows that. And he's learning as he goes.
Yeah, he's shown great stuff and growth, like you say, Sam, in that regard. And by all accounts, there are some coaches who we know in the game who, when something goes wrong, you can see how they feel about it immediately, and some of them are very animated in the way that they are displeased with the performance of their team. But by all accounts, Fitz is one of those people who has mastered the art of picking the right time to play that card of and demonstrative disappointment. And I see that as being net helpful, net positive for the development of some of what is, you know, still quite a young team in some regards, with a couple of more senior figures there. And being able to do that has provided a foundation that I think is going to be super helpful for the team as it starts to carve out this identity and this belief that we're not that team that's fallen out of the first week of the finals the last few years, and we're not going to allow ourselves to be attached to that stigma here. And we actually need to break that. Now we need to break that that hoodoo, that belief that that's who we are as a team, and it's going to come together against the tougher opponents and against tougher opponents this year, for which I think it's fair to call the Warriors and the Raiders decent opposition there to prove yourself against. They've stood up to the challenge, and that's all you can ask for at this point of the season. There are still things that they need to iron out. We're a month into the season, so there is some stuff that's going to take another month or two for us to figure out. But impressed by the way he's managed the players, impressed by the way he's managed his rotations and made hard calls. I was surprised a little bit by Iro's naming in the team yesterday, but that has nothing to do with the player himself and everything to do with the fact that that's probably different to how Fitz might have done things in the past. So I'm with you. I think it's been great.
It was, I mean, Iro has been on the cusp, but the game that he had last week, I think in some circles has been underplayed a little bit. Like he was an 8.5 out of 10 in his second game of NRL. Hasn't played NRL for 2 years. First game at centre in the NRL against Matt Timoko, who then on Sunday night lit up the NRL with his performance, albeit against a well-beaten Parramatta team, but still, like, that was impressive. So I don't think it was just so easy to go, yeah, Talakai, you're back out there. Like, yeah, there's reasons why Talakai's on the bench as a middle. We need that. But I'm assuming Iro's impressive game bought him another week, at least.
Yeah. And if he continues to play like he did, then I think it's hard to drop him, to push back on that type of performance. The risk is that what you ultimately do by putting him there regularly is that you risk Sifa potentially stepping into that kind of Tracy role of being the utility that's intended to just kind of move around as the team needs, which was not a bad outcome for us. We kind of did a great job moving around, but I'm not sure that the players ever appreciate that fully having to be the Swiss Army knife and not necessarily knowing specifically where you are. But the way that Iro played, it's hard to deny a jersey to someone who performs like that. And until he doesn't perform like that, I would continue to roll it out. And there are some people who have been on Iro for a while and have said he's ready to go. And there are some people who have cited that first game that he had as the reason that maybe he shouldn't go there. But it was great to see him go out there and roll out. And we maybe need to think about what the center position of the future for us looks like anyway. So why not give him those minutes there? And why not see what the combinations that he can make with some of these players that are out there?
The only thing I would urge listeners to do is not forget the contribution that Talakai has made in that position over the last 2 or 3 years, and the amount of tries he has set up for Ronaldo and scoring himself. Because, you know, at times in bigger games, the defense kind of let him down a little bit, the lateral defense. But if you look at it overall, moving this short, stocky back rower to the center as a makeshift position to cover something else has been a thorough success.
Absolutely. And it is one of those I'm curious to see if Fitz treats that as almost a opponent-based situational thing moving forward in terms of who's playing where, because for teams that jam up on the centers really quickly, Talakai can sometimes have a hard time against teams that are right up out of the line when they mitigate his ability to get a little bit of a run up, then by jamming up on them really quickly, then that makes it a little bit harder for him to do what he needs to do. And maybe Iro is the better player who has a little bit more lateral to his game, a little bit more left to right than Talakai might have. But in games where teams are going to, when we're playing against teams that are going to spot you that 5 or 8 meters before you even get to them, maybe it is Sipa that's the best person to absolutely do what he does, which is be a center wrecking ball there and quite a silky operator, even when the ball is going through hands. I don't think there's been anything that he's done that's indicated he can't be part of a great free-flowing passing movement either. So it'll be interesting to see how Fitz plays that one.
Yeah, and your point about transition is important because he's not getting younger, and I still see him with a big future at the Sharks. But then, as I mentioned in one of the other shows earlier in the last few weeks, you do start to think about your cap and who you're paying what to do what. And it's like, well, if he's going to become a middle bench player, and the middle bench is as important as the starting middles, but, are you going to pay someone that amount of money or more to play less minutes? And then other teams come sniffing around going, we'll have you at center for this amount of money, and just things like that. So you need to weigh up what you want him to be, where he's going to fit in. And then is the new fella everything you want him to be? Is he our future? Things like that. Darren Mooney and Fitzgibbon and other people at the club are constantly on that. So it's no surprise to them. But I think it's a good time to blood Iro, because if he's going to be the guy, we'll find out. If he's not, we'll have to get something else happening. But good time for it. Jardian, before we have a live read of an advertisement, I want to let you know, as a baller, that my young son Chester today at his school is go as your future self. What do you want to be? The dress up situation. So we've got like 1,000 Cronulla Sharks. We've got 1,000 Lionel Messi's. I saw some Taylor Swifts. I saw doctors, scientists. I saw a whole lot of people. My young son has gone as a LA Laker.
Wow, that's amazing to me. The basketball side, the Lakers side of it,
Yeah,
maybe like he can work on that, but the basketball side of it, love it. My man, Chester, gonna get dabbed up so much at school today.
He asked me things like, who's the best basketballer, and who do you think's the best basketballer? And I'll say, all time, probably Jordan. Let's throw in Kobe. Let's throw in LeBron. And he'll say, who's the best team? And I'll say, I don't have a team, but I really like the Minnesota Timberwolves. And he'll go, nah, it's the LA Lakers. And I went, and then I'll say, but all time, what about the Boston Celtics? He'll be like, nah, it's the LA Lakers. And I said, look, Lakers have got some periods of time where they've been unbelievable, but the league's been going for a while, and you can't just say it's one team. I'm trying to get that across to him.
Was there a player that he was gravitating towards that made him?
No, he's a Lakers fan because, like all 7 to 8 year olds, he follows what his mates are doing, and they all love LeBron. They all love Kobe. They all love Jordan. Just like in soccer, his favorite players are guys that I cannot stand. Like he talks about the soccer player Ronaldo more than I really care to talk about. And I'm a much bigger soccer fan than I am basketball. And so, I bought him a Liverpool jersey, which he's worn like twice. And then he'll talk about soccer players, and I'll mention current great Liverpool players, one in particular, and he'll be like, he's probably not even in the top 10. And I'm like, This is ridiculous.
Mm.
We can't have you growing up being a Manchester United or City fan. And I guess my point is, little kids gravitate towards the popular teams when they're not pushed. Now, I pushed Cronulla on him. He's a Cronulla Sharks fan. No worries. I haven't really pushed anything else on him. I've tried with the Vikings. He likes Justin Jefferson because I said every time he gets a touchdown, he gets a Slurpee. There's been a lot of Slurpees. But anyway, he's a baller today, and he's a Laker.
Love it. I love it. And I think just like his old man, he's very stats intuitive. He has chosen the team that has the most championships, well, the equal most, I guess, with the Celtics. So not a bad choice. Tell Chester I'm very proud of him, and that I'll spot a jump shot or two the next time that we see in the driveway.
All right. Now we need to talk about Dyson Logistics. They offer tailored and reliable end-to-end logistics services. They have thoughtful and careful approaches to freight and custom requirements, and they get your cargo, whatever that may be, big or small, to where it's going quickly, efficiently, and affordably. Their motto is local service delivered globally. They are friends of ours since day one. I know them personally. I've used them. They're fantastic. If you have any kind of logistical inquiry, you can call them on 028 339 1844 or go to dysonlogistics.com and tell them that we sent you. Now, Jardian, there's been some lower grade action, and there is some to come this week as well. This weekend, we have Harold Matz and Tasha Gale playing at Leichhardt. They're in elimination finals, which is awesome. So they need to get the job done, but it's good to see they've gone that far. Unfortunately, SG Ball and Lisa Fiola teams are out. The Newtown Shark Jets play South in the game before the NRL game. So if you're going out to Accor Stadium and you have the chance to get there early, go watch the Newtown Shark Jets. You will see players like Cade Dykes playing fullback, a guy that we have big raps on, Chris Vaiella in the centres, and just generally the Jets they're pretty entertaining to watch. So you can go out and watch that before the Sharks NRL game. And Jersey Flegg are playing at Pioneers Park. I'm not sure where that is. I'm assuming it's in the inner south. Is that a word? I don't know. They're playing South Sydney, so look that up. It's
We'll make it a word, Sam.
Yeah. So they need to win because they've lost a few games now, the Flegg team. Jards, have you been to Shark Park this year? I don't believe you have.
Not this year. Not yet. It's on the cards.
I know it is. I know. You've had a busy few months. What are your thoughts on... We know what your thoughts are generally as long-time listeners of the show about improving the stadium.
Yes.
Do you have any more kind of thoughts, ideas about things as far as the home turf goes? What do you think of the mural? The Lees Club will be ready at the end of the year, start of next year. Give us your general thoughts on that, and I'll put a requirement on there, which I never usually do, and don't make it too much of a downer. Be negative, but just give us some hope.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the mural restored my faith a little bit in a few things, because one of the things that I remember growing up and just feeling about Shark Park as often as I would go there is that it wasn't made like other stadiums, and it's not as I guess corporately focused as other stadiums. It's quite rugged, and the Sharks historically have been relatively unapologetic about that. We are like that in our club culture, in our history, about celebrating who we are. So the mural going up there, to me, actually made me think for the first time, well, hey, like, why don't we make a go of all this? And as you see slowly things building up, like you're watching the games on television, you can see bits and pieces of the Leeds Club around it starting to form and come together. Like the experience itself, it's not necessarily the most helpful for parents at times, but the atmosphere that you get at the stadium when it's cranking and when it's bopping is unmatched. There aren't a lot of places in the NRL that can compete with the competitive advantage that you get out of a packed Shark Park on a Saturday night or a Sunday afternoon when things are cranky. And we've seen that already again. So people know how I feel about just infrastructure generally, but I'm hopeful for what it's going to look like for us there. I would love to do a reassessment of my own personal views once we can get capacity back to something a little bit more than what it is. We actually had a team trivia in my team a couple of weeks ago, and one of the questions on the trivia was it was Family Feud style, and we asked people which team has the highest attendance or had the highest attendance in 2023 against the capacity of its stadium. And the Sharks were well and truly number one. But that has to do more with the fact that our stadium size at the moment is relatively small compared to others. So let me reassess how I feel about the stadium thing in general once we can open it back up. I've always just been a big advocate of trying to provide the best experiences in the world with stuff like this. But there is, if there's one thing that the Leichhardt game reminded me of, it's that so much of rugby league's identity is baked into this suburban atmosphere. And if you remove it entirely, that there have to be some teams that are willing to abide by that unwritten code of law to our games. And if we have to be one of the teams that has to bring that feeling to the game to reconnect people, then I'm happy for us to be one of those teams, even though it can occasionally mean I'm going to have a painful ticketing and egress experience. I will wear that for the benefit of keeping those roots connected.
I think in comparison to Leichhardt only, we're blessed that compared to, like, they have half of their stadium is basically standing in the hill. And that's why they get the bad raps, because it is so uncomfortable. It's physically uncomfortable. Whereas Shark Park, the general admission is probably, I don't know, 15%, 20% at the most. I'm making it up, but you know what I mean? It's the hill, a few areas around there. So I think from a standing point of view, viewing point of view, there's not too many times where you're actually physically cramped and can't move. It's more getting around can be a little bit dicey, especially with a pram or with a bunch of kids by your side. But I think sort of what you're getting at as well is, if moving forward, if we can continue to improve things, so improve the atmosphere with the mural, and Jess has been doing a few things with the music, which has been a bit better, and things like that. So that's great. The food trucks have been coming in. That's a lot better.
It is big time.
And just keep improving that, even as often as every game, getting better. Then at least they're doing things to improve it. They can't be criticized for that. The fact the club is getting closer, it's still a way away, the club, but the actual surrounding area looks really great. Like the new precinct, when you drive past, it doesn't look too messy anymore. It's actually, most of it's up and it's open, and it actually looks really good. Like the colors are up and the logo's up, and there's a car park, and slowly we're getting there. And we're still, as you say, we need a bit more capacity. We're probably a couple of years away from that still, unfortunately. But every time you go there, there is improvements. There are new things they're trying. We talked about it last few weeks. There's what have they got? They've got like the dancers come in at halftime and get people dancing and whatever. Like, it's just little things they're trying to do, right or wrong, whether you like it, you don't like it. At least we're not staying the same like we are. And maybe the outside world doesn't see that, but as people who go there regularly, people who live in the area especially, there is change. It's small. It's somewhat slow, but there's change.
Yeah, we'll get there. And it's easier for me now that I don't live in the Shire to comment about how much better life would be if we were actually in a big stadium, or
Mhm.
at least maybe not a big stadium, just a modern stadium that would help
Yeah.
with corporate sales, which would help with all these other things, which would help me as a parent kind of drag my children through the gates. My experience at Combank, which I've gone to a few times,
Amazing.
mostly whenever the Sharks there, effortless, borderline, like it's as smooth and frictionless. Sorry, as you can probably hope for in terms of taking your kids there, finding your seats, and not really having a lot of troubles getting any food or bev or going into the bathrooms or anything like that. And the view from whatever seat that you're sitting at in Combank is pretty mint. So that part is a little bit tricky to digest. But if I had to sacrifice all of that in order to help them
Mm.
feel the presence and the aura of Shark Park, then that's what they'll get. That's what I'll prioritize for them.
Yeah, and it's for me as a local, it's not the old rickety stadium that I'm clinging onto. It's the location. And it's
That's
exactly what you've just said. You've just said you go to a suburb and it just happens to be a new state of the art stadium. And that's what makes it great. It's not the fact that it's in a certain location as opposing fans, it's just the stadium. So if we had a new 20,000 seat stadium down here, we'd all be like, yeah, let's do it. Do it on that turf somewhere nearby, do it. So I
yeah,
think people like me who kind of cling to the idea of staying here, that's what it's about. It's not about, I want an old hill or I want the ET stand to stay the same. It's like, no. If you could give me Combank down there, man, I'd be the first one digging the hole. So,
yeah. And that's where I've
yeah.
gotten to. I think my views on this have evolved just a little bit, Sam. I had some pretty harsh views on the stadium generally, but having gone down there at the tail end of last year and being there when it's just on fire, it's a hard to replicate venue when it is on fire, and
Hmm.
that is a positive experience for fans. It is a positive experience for players. It's hard to rail against that. So I will deal with the pain of having to stand in line for something maybe 5 minutes more in order to preserve that element of nostalgia, but also connectivity to the
Yeah.
land that we're
Yeah.
on there. And I do think that the club are taking it. In my line of work, we work in what is almost cliche now, what they describe as agile ways, which is not necessarily rip it down and build something new all at once. It's make small iterations and release your products to people so that they can get value along the way, but don't ever feel like you have to wait until the big thing can be done before you start releasing the small things. And I think that's what they're doing. You described that before, which
Yeah.
is, start with your food trucks, start with your bathrooms, and start with these other things, and eventually you'll get on a roll, and you'll find that people might not necessarily care for the big thing that you were going to deliver back on the whiteboard on day one, that they're just quite happy to have these small iterations that improve their product, and you maintain that core feel and the core vibe of the place, which the Sharks, frankly, they will never experience a connection to the land with any other venue that they could have like they will the one that we have with Woolwear label down there.
Yeah. And I'm with you. I have to make this very clear. I want the best for our fans, our audience. I want the best experience they can have.
Hmm.
So, whilst I'm old school and I love that place, I'm all 110% for improvement. So I just want that to be clear because our fans deserve the best. We deserve the best, whatever that may mean, whatever is possible, then I'm all for that. So just wanted to throw that in. Now, Jardian, with my amazing rundowns that we do,
Hmm.
I feel like I have left a little bit of information off there, which is embarrassing for me and for our advertisers. So I'm just going to fly free here and hope that they're cool with this. But I do want to give a shout out to the Royal Motor Yacht Club. They are online. You can go find them. They've got a Facebook group. They're on Instagram, I believe. And they're an amazing club down in the, I guess, Woolaware-ish area down near the water. Beautiful place for members and guests. And they have a new restaurant type vibe happening, which our friend Liam has told us all about, and it's amazing. And we want you to go down there. They're supporters of SharkCast Pod. They're supporters of the Cronulla Sharks, and we do have to tell you though, there's no more free garlic bread. So if you go to them and go, I listen to SharkCast, I want a free garlic bread, they're going to go, it ain't happening. So just letting you all know that we've known about that for a few weeks now, but just wanted to remind you about that. And Liam, I promise I'll get a new ad up for you as soon as we can. But just wanted to give the Royal Mighty Yacht Club a shout out. It's not on our rundown. It should be there. It's very important to us. And while I'm also doing that, Jardian, let's give a shout out to Jason Hawes. He's a real estate agent in the Sutherland Shire, specifically in the with his paws all over the North Caringbah area, but it stretches as far as Cronulla all the way up to Sutherland. He's a lifelong Sharks fan. He's a member. He's a season ticket holder. He loves this show. He helps us out, and he's a terrific fellow. He's as honest as they come, particularly in that world, which can get a little bit, I'm not going to say dishonest, but just he's as honest as you get, Jason Hawes, and tell him that we sent you and he'll look after you. Even if you have an inquiry about anything to do with real estate, I know he will help you out. So just giving a shout out to some of our good mates. But Jardian, we'll get onto the mail, and we'll start with long-time listener RCB. And he talks about Iro, and he says that if you want Talakai to be a bench forward, then play Iro, but more in the middle rotation. He didn't get nearly enough work in the back row. Playing in the middle settles this and negates the need for Dale Finucane, who I believe is a liability now. So alarm bells and headlines appear. RCB thinks Dale Finucane is a liability, offers little with the ball, slow, old, no point of difference. So on that, Jardian, what do you think about what RCB is saying there?
Isn't it interesting that we now view Talakai as a better center option and probably a better middle than we do a back rower, which is where we might have started this whole journey. Like it's interesting that RCB is saying there that if you play him as a middle, that's okay, but as a back row, that there wasn't enough work that he got through there. I don't actually disagree at all with the feedback that's come in there. I do believe if I was to rank the order of impact that he could have for our team, I probably still feel that this is nothing to do with Iro and everything to do with Talakai, that his best position right now is still center. And then after that, probably middle. And then after that, probably in the back row there. So I think the order that RCB has outlined there is probably right. The comment about Dale's stuff, in terms of the on-field production, well, the stats probably support what RCB is saying there. And the one thing I would say about that, though, is probably that in the last few years, at least, our club has a history of bringing in experience and putting it on the bench and letting that experience add value that might not necessarily appear on the stat sheet. We did it with Andrew Fafita and Aiden Tolman. We did it with Wade there, where the leadership that they provided were probably transcendent of anything that you're going to see on the highlight reels or any dialogue that you're going to have around fantasy or Supercoach. That probably is where I think Dale sits now in the conversation, is that his value to the team is probably more in that leadership and in setting the habits in training and in maintaining a culture of excellence and achievement there, which is contagious, and which, if it's not there, sets you up for just an uncertain, like you put all the onus on attitude and expectation setting on people who are still trying to formulate and decide what their own expectations of themselves are. Having someone set that bar there is probably where you get most of the value out of Dale there, which I think is not what RCB is contesting either. I think RCB would say the same thing there, but as a player, totally get the same there. So I think my view on this one is that if I have to choose right now, I play Iro. I probably do view Talakai as more of a middle than as a back rower option there. So yeah, I probably think I'm on board with that feedback.
Yeah, and I think you put it really, really wisely for a great pun of the show. But I think RCB is fully aware of what you just said. He's fully aware of what he brings to the team. I think, speaking for RCB, and I'm sure he'll clear this up with me via email if I'm wrong, that he's putting all the other stuff ahead of that. He's putting the leadership and the maturity and experience at the back of importance for this player. And I understand that. I think just as a whole, I think that as fans, we tend to put lines through guys based on emotion and based on recent bias. And I understand both of those things. You look at Fafita, look at Wade Graham. They both came really good towards the end of their seasons, finishing their careers. And I think Dale's still got a story to tell. But I think as far as just hit ups and playing and impact goes, I think that RCB's on the money. I think that he's falling down that depth chart, which is weird to say for a guy who's done everything he's done. But I still think he brings something. I still will find a place for him in my 17 most weeks, I think. But it would be the role you're talking about.
Yeah, which is fine too, I think. And
Yeah.
they're one of the coaches that I've had in life who I probably have the utmost respect for even now, at a high performing level. His mantra here was that he will always select a team on meritocracy, but meritocracy is earned in training, not necessarily on execution on game day. And if that's the attitude that Fitz has as well, then that's where I probably think Dale earns his spot. Is we know that he trains the house down, and we know that he, would never ask anyone to do something that he wouldn't do himself. So we'll see.
RCB also talks about Hunt versus Tuku. He says it's a real thing. He thinks Tuku offers something different given how huge he is. And I tend to agree with him. I think it is a real battle for one of those spots. I'm not saying you can't have them both. I think at times you will have them both. But I think at other times when everyone's fully fit, it's going to be, who do you want, Royce Hunt, or do you want Big Tuku? What are your thoughts on that, Juds?
Ooh, this part I didn't particularly have too strong a feeling on, because I think you get both. You get good and bad out of both situations. Mostly good. Tuku, I've been really impressed with so far, but I sometimes wonder if when I'm watching and feeling impressed by what he's doing there, if what I'm seeing is like an early version of when Fitz first came to the club, and we were starting to see some absolute phenomenal growth in the way that we were playing with the ball against the attacking try line, when we had basically a few set plays where the ball would just ever so smoothly move from Brayley all the way down the hands to Ronaldo. And we had these amazingly impressive sweeping plays, which Will Kennedy was often the key in. And I just remember being so impressed by that. But then teams figured it out. But then teams figured out how you stop that from happening. And if you really jam up on these guys here, that's not so easy to do. And the only thing that I would say about the Tukey thing is that we're still very early in his piece there. And I wonder what he looks like when teams have had 10 weeks worth of tape to look at and say, okay, I think we figured out how we can stop this. Because I do think that that's probably there.
The only thing I'll say about that, Jards, is there's not a lot of trickery going on. There is a huge human running straight lines. The only way you stop him is with 3 or 4 guys.
That's true.
And that's not a bad thing.
Yep. No, not at all. Not at all.
I'm with you, though, that we shouldn't be going off too early. I'm with you there.
Yeah. And there are ways to... This happened, I guess, when I think Taumalolo was really starting to come into his own there as a bit of a wrecking ball there. Which, by the way, I always feel that if Andrew Fafita didn't come along and do what he did to change the perception of that position there, then Taumalolo doesn't see the offer that he does. I think Andrew Fafita genuinely changed the game and changed the way that people view that position there, and many other people have benefited since then. But it was the same situation for him too. Like eventually, teams figure out how you can slow down someone, even if they are in that situation. There are ways to, I guess, mitigate the impact of a person that's that big running at you, and it probably has to do with exactly what you're doing to run at him when you have the ball. I mean, oftentimes the way that you take them out of the game is you just send every forward at that same player every single time down the field, and they'll have no gas left by the time they get the ball back. That's always been a staple there. So, but look, if I had to choose right now, I do think it's a real thing. But when you're building for the future, Tuku probably has a bit of an edge here because of the flexibility that he gives you with the cap, the clean bill of health that he's had to date. Granted, it's small sample size there. So I understand the value proposition that RCB is talking about there with Tuku.
Okay, Troy says, I went away for the long weekend over Easter. I put my 4 season seats up for resale. When Josh Bolling was explaining at the beginning of the show the other week where he sat for the Canberra game, I was 80% sure he's talking about our seats. But at the end of the show, I was convinced he was 100% sitting in my seats. I'm glad he enjoyed them. It doesn't surprise me. They're the best seats at Shark Park. So, Josh, I know you're listening, my friend, and Troy, I'm assuming you're listening too. That is where your magical 4 seats came from. And I guess we've got to give a shout out to the Mighty Sharks Club for getting their resale production line happening, because it was a few years in the making. Jards, I know that's something you'd probably approve of.
Yeah, absolutely. And more of it, please.
Yeah. All right. Now, bit of a theme this week, Jards. We haven't touched on it too much. There's a few in the mail section, but also I'm just getting bombarded with DMs and everything else. People in the street, down at the cafe, and I'm all for it. Like, bombard me. This is what I'm here for. No complaints. But Adam says this. He says, I'm very worried about the game against Souths. They've copped heaps in the media. These situations never go well for us. So just on that, and there's a bunch more which we'll get into, but do you have any thoughts on that, Jardian, right now?
Yeah, I am worried, like Adam, for reasons that we shouldn't be worried about. Yeah, you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I want you to talk about it.
So you can only play the team that's in front of you, and none of your preparation midweek should have to do with the amount of media that the opposition is getting or anything like that. My worry here against Souths this weekend has nothing to do with what Souths are going through, and everything to do with, well, what does that say about our team if we can't beat Souths under these particular circumstances? Mm-hmm. What does that mean about the mettle and the resilience and the focus and clinical nature that premiership teams have if we have a game against a team who are blooding, who are fielding a really young team and relatively inexperienced there? If we can't take care of business there, that's what worries me. It's not, I'm not worried about anything that is South's facing. I'm not worried about anything that's related to South. I'm worried about what that means about us if we don't have the ability to push through. We've done this dance already in Leichhardt,
yes,
where that was a game that, and that's probably why Adam is worried, is because that was a game where the heat was on Benji. Heat, very similar set of circumstances there, and yet somehow they came out and absolutely rolled us in every aspect of the game. That's where I'm sure that a large part of that worry comes at. But my attitude to this is probably the same attitude that I have to that, which is that premiership teams take care of those situations. Like you know what I mean?
So I'm with Adam and I'm with all the other warriors. I'm a warrior myself, but at some point you need to put that worry aside and focus on something else, because I would say this: start worrying at 9:30 on Saturday night if we don't walk away with the 2 points, whether we win by 1 point in extra time or we win by 50 or win by something in between. If that doesn't happen, start worrying then. Don't worry about it now. It's wasted worry. It's wasted energy. And I agree with everything you just said. So, I will counteract that by saying I understand the worry. I've been there for some reason in my life right now. And believe me, my life is not all rosy and peachy and walking on clouds. But for some reason, I can see past this. This doesn't make me better than the next person. It's just where I'm at, and it's where you're at. And I think that if we can influence people a little bit to at least try that kind of point of view, I think it's for the better. But I do understand the thought that, the Sharks. Now, we've got a few things that I've highlighted in red here, Jardian, which we'll talk about, a couple of examples, which will, I think, further our argument here.
Yeah.
So in a different subject matter, but still prove the same point. So Adam says, any idea how we compare to other teams when it comes to conceding first points? It seems like we let the opposition score first and early in every game. He then says this has been the case for a few years too. And I'm not picking on Adam. Adam knows I love him. The answer to that is this year we've conceded the first try in 3 of 4 games. Okay, so he's right. In the 3 games we've conceded the try, we've won all 3 games. So it hasn't been a negative. We've actually won the game. Now, that may not happen every time we concede a try first up. But to answer your question, Adam, is yes, it's happened, and we've won every time it's happened. In 2023 last year, it happened 15 times. Sorry, it happened 10 times we conceded the first try. We won 4 of those. But last year was different because we actually scored first in 15 of the games. So last year it wasn't really a thing. It kind of evened out. It wasn't really a thing. My point, Adam, is, and I'm probably not making it that great, is what we think is going on isn't necessarily the case. Just because South are in the media, yeah, they should start really aggressively and full of energy. It doesn't mean we're going to lose. So I just wanted to kind of say that. He also gives a shout out to the fine looking fellas who are a local band, Jardian, who play at the Sutherland Farmers Market as well as other places. And one of the guys in the band last week wrote to us. I can't remember the name. I apologize profusely. But one of the fellas from the fine looking fellas wrote to us and wanted a plug. He had a plug, and this week he's got another plug because Adam has seen them play. He said they're perfect for sunny Saturday morning market days. So moving on. Thank you, Adam. Sharks to Sean said, good to see Nico hitting the line versus Canberra with his shoulders square, not always dipping in with lateral movements and being picked off. So that kind of furthers your point, Jardian, that Nico is in a good way with his defense.
Yeah.
He then says it's disappointing hearing constant media comments that the Warriors and Raiders should have won their game against us. It's never about how well the Sharks performed under duress and pressure. And, I agree with that statement, Sharks to Sean. I would again kind of say, just kind of don't worry about it. Like, just look at those 4 competition points. And the media who Jardian and I guess, work with, or historically, or maybe in the future, and certainly currently, it's their job to kind of get some drama out of the game. That's what they do. Whether you like it, whether you don't like it, that's the job. They probably would focus more on Canberra giving up an 18-0 lead rather than the Sharks coming back from 18-0 to win by 10 points. That's kind of how the game's played. You do say you'd like to see Iro take Jesse Ramian's spot for a while. Now, here's a headline, Jardian, that we're seeing from Sharks to Sean. You would like to see Jesse Ramian's spot taken by Kale Iro. I think the team offers more with Talakai and Iro at the in the center positions. Nothing against Jesse. He's a strong presence and has been notable in 2024. but Iro offers speed and some variety that he does not. Perhaps this would be good for the team. That's from Sharks to Sean. Now, I want to start this, Jardian, by saying Sharks to Sean knows about rugby league. He follows this club.
Yeah.
He follows this club really intelligently. We love Sharks to Sean. However, I'm going to take this email, scrunch it up in a bit of paper. He knows I love him, and it's going out my window, which is shut right now, because no. I do not want to see Jesse Ramian moved. I think he's having a great year. I know your point is you want to see Iro and Talakai in the centers. I get that. If there's an injury, suspension, whatever, try it. That's a no from me. Juds?
I mentioned it at the top of the show too, Sam. It's a no for me as well. Jesse's had a strong year on the whole, and it's hard to drop him out of that particular place there for something that is a little less certain right now. I know we're all excited about what we saw out of Iro there. Don't get me wrong. But we need to kind of understand what that would look like on a consistent level, on a consistent basis, before we actually know that Jesse needs to be dropped in order to achieve that. So I'm with you. I do think that the point could be right that maybe you do get a little bit more out of Talakai and Iro in the centers, but we don't know that right now. And I don't think it's the time to be experimenting with that while you've got someone there who is already performing at a relatively high level. There will be a time for that to happen, and there will be a time for that to be experimented with. But the time is not when you have someone who's doing a decent job and off to a good start. And irrespective of the stats there, you can kind of see there are some players, there are some people in the team who, when they're not out there, you can see that it kind of messes with the mojo of the people who would usually play outside of them. We saw it a little bit with Connor Tracy last year. He did an admirable job, but you could tell that the connection between Will to Connor to Ronaldo was not the same as it was when Talakai was out there. And I think that would be the same. That would be true of Jesse as well, that the relationship that he has with his inside and outside players is a little bit more established would be. And I assume that Talakai would have to stay on the same edge, that in this world, he would have to stay on the same edge in order to maintain the value that has been described there by Sharks to Sean. And that means that you've got to put Iro on the other edge. And we don't know enough about that edge yet, what that edge would look like with him there and not Jesse.
I would also say to Sharks to Sean, and I'm sure he's already doing this, but I would say to him, watch Jesse off the ball as well, because he does a lot off the ball for a center. Sometimes centers just hang out on their edge and don't get up to much, but he's always heavily involved. And I've noted that on the episodes this year. Like this year, he's heavily involved. So it's a left of center. Is that a right fun? It's a right of center idea, but and we're listening to you, but we both disagree. But we want to hear from the fans. If listeners disagree with our point of view, agree with Sharks or Sean, please let us know. Steve has written in and said, the Rabbits have 3 players in the spine with 10 games or less. We cannot possibly lose. If we do, it will show that this team does not want to win. Now, I understand what you're saying, Steve, and I mostly agree with what you're saying. The last bit of sentence, I'm assuming, is an emotional sentence and not one that is there for the rest of eternity to be called upon, that this team does not want to win. I can tell you they want to win because it's their job to win. They're heavily invested as professionals to win, and they want to win every game they play. Even when they're coming last in 2014, they want to win games. So understand what you're saying. You say the South middles are weak and you want to roll straight through the middle. You want Braley to help with that. You're saying nothing stupid, play hard, don't take the foot off the throat. If any of the players start to look complacent in attitude, hook them. You also think Tuki's going to score his first try. So you're pretty revved up, Steve. I love it. And I think you're right in the sense of how you want to play the game. Just play hard and do what you do, and you will get the 2 points.
I think to that I would say, Steve, we can lose, but we shouldn't. And it's as simple. And if we do, then the medal that we've spoken about before, yes, would definitely come into question. The focus, the ability to just take care of business. That's when I'm assessing Sam, premiership teams and championship teams more broadly in sports. Very rarely am I looking at how, well, not very rarely, but as seriously as I treat how they perform against teams at the top of the sphere, like who are around their orbit in the top half of the ladders or the tables that they're in, I also care about how they take care of business against teams that they should. And we often focus about how the Sharks can beat teams in the past, how they can beat teams that aren't in the top 8 but can't take care of business that against teams that are in the top 8, and we sometimes praise teams who are in the top 8. But I think it goes both ways. I feel the same thing about teams that are in the top 8 who can't take care of business, at the bottom. I'm like, well,
Absolutely.
Guess what? You're also maybe not as serious as you think you are. The ones that we're really serious about are the ones who take care of both. The ones that they should win in tight games and the ones that they shouldn't blow out.
I always harp on about this game, but in 2016, I guess was it halfway through the year, we beat the Bulldogs with a James Maloney kick from the sideline after the bell. And it was not a great victory. But they got the job done and they kept going on their journey. If you have to win with a Nico Hines kick after the bell to win the game on Saturday night, do it. We're not going to sit around and talk about it was the most amazing performance from the team, but we're going to be pretty happy with the result. And at the moment in week 6, it's about the result as much as it is the performance. Performance is everything. I get that. But if we're peaking in week 6, what are we doing? We want a result in week 6. We want a result. So we feel you, Liam. Let's go do it. Not Liam, sorry. That was Steve. Liam is up next. He said recently you were talking about Britton Nickera being out of the starting lineup and how it affects other people's defense, like Nico Hines, because they built these combinations over a long period of time. I wonder whether us having Newtown as a reserve grade team and not a Sharks reserve grade side hinders or helps us on the field. Does Newtown play exactly the same style of attack and have the same defensive system as our first grade team? If they do, that's great. If they don't, it's a bigger disadvantage when calling up players. So completely understand what you're saying, Liam. The answer to your question, I think, is that Craig Fitzgibbon and his coaching staff would be in touch with the Newtown Jets and they would have a say over whether they need one of their top 30 guys to play for them and a role they could play with them. I don't think they play the exact style of football, having seen both teams play quite a lot over the last few years. But to counter that, I will tell you, which you may or may not know, is that the top 30 guys train with the Sharks. So, for example, yesterday at Jardian, I was down there, and Jaden Beryl was training with the Sharks. All those guys, Kate Dykes, all the guys that you playing for Newtown, they train with the Sharks, and they double up and do a session or two with the Jets, of course. So when they come in to fill in for the top 18 or whatever, so when Kate Dykes gets his shot this year at some point, he will have been part of Sharks training sessions week in, week out and preseason. So there's no real disadvantage there. I understand what Liam is saying, but they're not unaware of what's going on.
Sounds like it could be more of a disadvantage to the Jets than the Sharks.
I think so. And the Jets actually do pretty good year in, year out. So, and you see it from times when we've had a lot of injuries. And so Big Tuku's got to come in and Dan Atkinson comes in. They do lose a bunch of their star players and somehow they're still sort of in the top 4 most weeks. So it's much more of a disadvantage to them. And as I sort of said last week and had a few people biting back a little bit about it, but if you want to compare the importance to the Cronulla Sharks and the Newtown Jets, I can't really help you. Like there's a reason why one is more important in 2024 and one isn't. And I'm not saying it's more important to an individual. I just mean as a collective, and
Yeah.
we know why. So that's, I don't think, Liam, we're at a disadvantage there. Put it that way. Adam asked, did we end up finding a copy of the Shark Attack song from, I believe, the late 80s? And we actually haven't found it. And we got in touch with Ashley, the club historian, and he sent me a song which was a different Shark Attack song. It's still amazing, but it's not the one that you were writing to me about, Adam. Judd, I think this is before your time, man, but there was a Shark Attack song. In my head, it's late 80s, the sort of Gavin Miller, real successful years, and very much of its time, the song and the production, but still important to those who lived through it. And we're looking for it. I'm sure we'll find it.
I heard that. Yeah, I was listening to that, and I know that it's on the cards. You're right. I don't know the specific song that you're talking about, Sam. I was maybe a little too young, or quite possibly not on the earth yet. That song was out there and being played, but I have heard people talk about it, and I'm pretty sure I read about a reference to it recently, either on a forum or in a book. But you know, maybe it was Gary Lester's book that I was reading through. So I know
they used to, in all honesty, if it's the same song I'm thinking of, and I don't think I'm rewriting history here, and I'm sure as soon as Ashley hears this, he's going to be on eBay and all sorts of forums trying to find it. I'm sure they used to sell it as a cassette single, so just like one song on a cassette. I'm sure. I'll have to ask my big brother about this, but I'm sure
That's
like
great.
the band. I think it was the band. I don't think it was the club. It was a band used to play it at one end of the ground. It used to be a live band. So and I know a lot of people know this who are my age and up, which is a lot of us listening, but there's a lot of people listening who are not. Where the Southern Stand is, it was basically very, very small grass area. I would hesitate to call it a hill. And then there was like 4 or 5 tiered long rows of wooden kind of seating that went all the way along the back, not the back area, the area there on the road. And there was a band at one point. Our friend Craig will know this, actually. There was a band at one point, and I'm sure it was the same band that wrote and sang this song called Shark Attack. And I'm almost positive that they sold the cassette. I feel like I would have bought it. I have no memory of buying it. I don't have it, but
if anyone listening to this has that cassette, please get in touch with Sam. Please.
I mean, I prefer a digital copy, but if you have a cassette, we'll try and work it out. But anyway, the answer is I don't have it. I can probably, after a few beverages, sing it to you. I'm not going to do it right now. Steve says, great win against the Faders. Now get ready to play the Rabbits, who are currently last. We haven't pointed that out, Jards. Souths are coming last. That's a massive incentive. Forget about the coach and the press. They're last. That's an incentive for them. Now, here's another point of view from a listener, a fan who knows a lot about the game, that I'm going to dispel the theory, not the myth, but the idea. So Steve says, I worry every time we come off the bye, we seem to lose. Okay. Now, I'm here to tell you we've won 4 of the past 5 matches after having the weekend off. The only loss was in round 14 against Brisbane. So, Jardian, 4 of the 5 last times we've had the weekend off, for whatever reason, we've won. So, Steve, do not worry about that as a reason that we may not perform or get the result. It's not a thing. If we don't perform or get the result, it's something else. It's not because we had the weekend off, in my opinion. He said, this is a game we must win. They'll be desperate. We have to focus and lead from the start, which I agree with. He then says, if we're serious, we'll put at least 30 on them, which is a great idea. And I know why you're saying it. I don't necessarily agree with it. You said Jack had the best game I've seen him play against the Raiders and needs to continue that form. You then asked a question about the future. Who's going to go when Fonua Blake arrives? This is the question Fitzy needs to be asking the players to let them know they're on notice and get the best out of them. Go beat those Rabbitohs. Big up. Jardian, is that an incentive for a player? I don't think it's one for a coach, but for a player right now at the Sharks to be looking over their shoulder, seeing this monstrous shadow coming from New Zealand?
I think so, but I do think it is partially one for the coach too, Sam. I would like to imagine a world in which, I'm not describing the Hunger Games here, where you create this diabolical system by which only one person can survive and everyone else is going to this enormous victim.
Not good for team morale, the old Hunger Games.
No. But I would like to imagine a conversation that Fitz has had with the people who are, on notice, as Steve says. And that conversation being something to the effect of, like, this is it. We have a roster shortage for next season. Yes, not everyone in this room right now is going to be able to be here next year. And the way we're going to determine that are the performances that you have now. I would like to imagine that much has been made clear to them, because that would be, in my mind, healthy dialogue to have with people and incentivizing dialogue to have, regardless of who is in the team next year or who is not going to make the cut. Whoever doesn't make the cut is going to have other people. Like, we have very talented forwards in our team. It will not be hard for any of them to find another gig. Of that much, I know. But I'm sure that they all want to stay here, and I would be definitely leveraging that. I don't know the answer to who is going. I know contractually who is not going next year, and we can maybe start with that as a bit of an indicator for what we should be looking at.
Contracts are not a strong point of, not one of my strengths, Jards, but I think from memory, it's Kafusi and Jack Williams who are off contract.
So
I think everyone else might be tied up, I think.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like, it becomes pretty clear who are the people that are on the hook when you just look at the contracts and when you look at some of those other things that are in there as well. So I don't think we know the answer to who's going when he gets there yet. And I don't think we will know the answer until we're middle to the end of this season around, and we're in the rhythm or we're not in the rhythm there. So I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I think we've got time to answer it if there is a silver lining to the fact that we couldn't see him this year, which I would have absolutely loved to have him out there right now. It is that we get to assess what that should look like and what that will look like. On the earlier parts of Steve's message there, this is one game that we must win. Yes, I think that's right, but not for anything to do with the ladder and for everything to do with carving your identity as a premiership threat.
Absolutely.
We don't need the 2 points, but we do need to know that we can take care of business in games that we should take care of business. That's where it is a must win.
Yeah, and let's not forget, around the corner, soon enough, there'll be a 3 or 4 game stretch, which, if all the teams stay the way they are, it's going to be super challenging. So, but having said that, hopefully we're lifting as well, and it'll be 2 great teams going for it each week. Last bit of correspondence, Jardian. James sent this in. Thank you, James. And it's a photo from, I think, Instagram. And it's from the Savannah Bananas. So Savannah, I'm assuming in America, I'm not sure what the Bananas do with themselves. They're a sporting team. It's baseball, right? It's baseball, I think. And between innings,
that is definitely baseball field. Yep.
Yeah. Between innings, their entertainment on the field. So, for want of a better word, halftime entertainment, pre-game entertainment. The Savannah Bananas race babies between innings. It's the most exhilarating baby race that's ever taken place. And you zoom in on the photo, and there's the host, your Dane Wheeler, if you want, in bright yellow. And there's a number of babies, 1, 2, 3, like 7 or 8 babies on one side of the short space of green grass. And on the other side, I imagine that's parents both willing their baby on and also documenting it at the same time. I'm here for this, Jardian. I think this is something we can get behind. I know that many people at the Sharks, from from Dino at the top and Mace to your middle people like Jess and Gary and your lower people like Rob Willis. I'm kidding, Robbie. They listen to the show. I think this is good entertainment. Racing babies.
I've seen it happen at the NBA a couple of times, and from just like as we are in Australia, the highlight of this is when you have these babies get so close to the finish line and then just get distracted by something that is completely otherwise, like it's like a light on the ceiling that they've just noticed or something, and you've got their parents who are like 1 meter, 2 meters away from them, just trying to will them, embarrassingly sometimes, over the line. I would be for this. I mean, I imagine that grass would be pretty slick and pretty wet when we're playing most of our games. Right. I think there might be a few parents who might unvolunteer their children from having to do laundry.
So we're both for it, but would you race your baby in reality?
In reality?
Would you be out there going, yes, my baby's going out there?
You put up something, Sam, that is good enough for me, and that's a very low bar, by the way.
What are you talking? Jersey, hat, hot dog?
I'll do this for Happy Meals.
Happy Meals
for my family. And I'm there. I'm right there.
Okay.
But I can tell you right now, based on the way that the children in my house are behaving, I am no threat to any other parent to win this one. My children have no intentions of listening to my voice or do anything that I want them to right now.
Starting to get a
shout
bit
out parents,
mate. Massive shout out to parents. I have other thoughts on that, but I'm not going to say it because it'll get me in a lot of trouble. So, Jardian, I'm going to make a live in the moment, Cam McInnes captain decision right now, because later in the week I'm very confident that SharkCast Pod will be doing a preview in depth with another guest about the big clash on Saturday night. We're going to skip our preview, you and I. Just give me a result that's going to happen. Tell me very quickly what's the score going to be. What are your thoughts? By how much?
28-16 to the Cronulla Sharks.
Lovely.
Cronulla Sutherland Sharks.
All right. Here's what's going to happen for the rest of this episode. Jardian and I are going to talk about the grandest event of the year. And we encourage you to keep listening. If for some reason, and I'm not even going to say the word sports entertainment, I'm going to say if for some reason professional wrestling does not excite you or interest you, we're going to bid you a farewell. We're going to say goodbye. Sayonara. We'll see you on an episode in a couple of days. Thank you for your support. Up, Cronulla. Let's go. Let's smash these Rabbitohs. Hey, I don't mind Jason Demetrio, but let's just beat them, please. Jardian and I are going to talk about Wrestlemania for a little bit. It won't be for an hour because we don't have that time, but it'll be just for a little bit. We're going to talk about Wrestlemania. And you know why? Because we want to, and also because a number of our listeners also like the subject matter that is professional wrestling. That's the disclaimer. Do not send in hate mail about it. I've given you an out. Love you guys and girls. See you later. Stick around. Jardian, Wrestlemania. I'm up to date. Don't know how I did it, but I am. I do know how I did it. I'm not going to disclose how I did it, but I did it. I got there. I'm up to date with Raw. Professional wrestling is back. It's cool. And your bloodline, I'm convinced you're related. You're related to Dwayne The Rock Johnson. And I mean that without any kind of stereotyping or any kind of the badness. Like I'm 100% convinced that you're somewhere on that. You know what? You're missing from that family tree that he lovingly had. You're probably related to. I only know her by her real name now. To Lena Finane, who I love. Everyone doesn't like her. I love her.
Oh.
Anyway, I love her in all sorts of ways, I should point out. Anyway, tell me about Wrestlemania.
Well, let me bit of backstory just so that everyone knows. Grew up in the So my first exposure to wrestling, I won't spend too long on this, but I think it's important to note this. My first exposure to wrestling was Wrestlemania 3. I was a
Oh,
little baby, and my dad and my uncle, this was back in the Blockbuster and Video Easy days, they
yeah.
just so happened to find a video cassette of Wrestlemania 3. At that point, it was probably like, I don't know, 6 months or 9 months after the event had actually happened. So this wasn't in the world of live streaming or even like live
No.
broadcast. This was before that.
Yes.
Brought it home, watched it, and the spectacle of it was pretty good. But I never really jumped on board with 2 feet there. I just became aware of what professional wrestling was then. So I knew.
I got to just say, for our younger listeners, younger viewers on the YouTube, if you haven't seen WrestleMania 3, and I'm probably talking to our friend Kieran Fraser specifically, although I want to watch that with him. WrestleMania 3, Hulk versus Andre, right? Everyone talks about it. Everyone talks about another match. And if you were to assume that it wasn't the match they're talking about, or 30, 40, 37 years later, it doesn't stand up to what they're talking about. Steamboat versus Savage is literally the greatest match of all time. Continue.
It's up there. It's right up there. So that was
It's it.
That was that. That was my first exposure to it, Sam. And I was too young to fully immerse in it, and the resources weren't there to fully immerse with it. You kind of had to be in America at the time, kind of traveling with the team or anything to kind of know what was going on there. Fast forward a few years, I'm a teenager. The Attitude Era is basically at the height of its powers. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's Shawn Michaels on his way out of DX. It's Mike Tyson coming to WrestleMania 14 and being there. It is the wrestling has gone mainstream by this point. It's The Rock, it's The Undertaker, it's all these people. Never an era like it, and possibly never since, and maybe we're about to find out if there will ever be one like that again. I will say that in terms of wrestling eras and things that have happened there may have been other eras that were longer. There may have been other eras that lasted for a greater length of time. The fire may have burned longer for other eras on either side of the Attitude Era, but it never burned as hot as it did during the Attitude Era. So that's where I was. I ducked out again, kind of had to take care of life of being an adult a little bit.
They want you to grow up. Everyone wants you to grow up. And so you have to. I don't watch it anymore. I grew up.
So I did that. And then only recently, maybe a few years ago, I started seeing more condensed versions of these things. And my kids are now old enough to kind of have a son who's 14, a son who's 12, and then 2 daughters who are 10 and 8. And the boys are kind of there with it. So their casual interest in it piqued my old interest in it. And what we ended up happening in the last few years is a scenario where we're not watching Raw and SmackDown live, and we're definitely not watching the whole thing. But through short little YouTube clips and through Bleacher Report articles, we can kind of follow along with the storylines as is. And as often as there's a major pay-per-view, we can tune in there, sometimes live, but not really, unless it's one of the big 4. And we follow along. This year, fast forward to what just happened, it was as close to that Attitude Era as I described before as we've ever had. And because of that, the one thing about the Attitude Era that most people will remember is that what made it so special wasn't just really the edginess of it. It was the fact that the casual person who didn't care about professional wrestling could still recognize who some of the names that they were hearing were. And we got that over the last month, or over the last few months. So it's hard to describe to people who don't care about wrestling what happened here, because even my wife, who absolutely does not care about wrestling, knew, in the same way that my daughters, who don't care about football, knew who Travis Kelce was. by the end of the whole Taylor Swift thing. Like that's where we got to with WrestleMania 40. We got to points where people on the fringes who would never publicly admit that they once liked this stuff were slowly paying attention again. And it was just one of, I know we've watched, spoiler alert for those who are not up to date with the latest Raw, it has now been described as the greatest WrestleMania of all time. And I think the events itself, it's hard to deny that that's not the case. Like it was probably going back to just before the Royal Rumble. So we're going in advance of the Royal Rumble now. I actually think the whole thing starts mostly when CM Punk comes back, and he didn't even have anything to do with this thing, but I know that was probably not the original plan at the time. Yeah. Everything just escalates. The Rock comes back. He makes one comment about whether or not after that particular show, when he's going out and having a feed, he should sit at a booth or at a bar or at the head of the table.
Unbelievable.
That just triggers everything. And I am looking forward, Sam, to 10 years from now when people are willing to talk about how this all actually came together. What happened behind the scenes? Because it just seemed like there was a plan out of the gate and we're talking here we assume that we're talking to the converted here. So I'm assuming that people kind of know
everyone's tuned up
what I'm talking about when I talk about this. But it didn't.
I'd be surprised. I'd be I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if this didn't happen. And I think it's common knowledge that this is the theory. We were getting Rock versus Roman, and people like me were all for it. Like when he said, "Where should I sit?" That was an amazing, like that was a chilling moment. It was an oh my God moment, like a proper one. We saw people like your son, Cody Crybaby,
big time,
say, no, it's Cody's time, Cody Rhodes' time. And I think, and it's been acknowledged, sorry for the pun, that the corporation, especially Trips, he went, you know what? We can avoid a lot of people turning off here and shoot it through the roof by making you the bad guy. Let's quickly make you, Rocky, the bad guy. You're going to side with your cousin. You're going to show us the family tree. And then Cody's going to win the belt. It's his story. It's his dream. Da, 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 da. That's where we got to. Now there's heaps of other stories around that. You know, we're looking at Cody versus Rock at some point. I still feel like there's going to be a falling out with Roman and Rock as well. And it's, for me, the number one thing when people ask me, oh, what do you like that? It's the storyline. It's not the athleticism. It's not the fireworks. It's the storylines. I'm a story guy. I love stories. It is unbelievable. And even you want to talk about greatest WrestleMania of all time, take away that unbelievable main event where they had the past and the present connecting. The first event where Drew McIntyre achieves his dream, wins in front of a crowd. He's already got a rivalry with CM Punk. He gets in CM Punk's face after he wins the belt. He's got the belt for 5 minutes. CM Punk somehow is injury-free and messes him up. Damian Priest's music hits. He's got the money in the bank. He's the new champion. I was out of my seat, off my lounge, dusting off chips off my shirt. That was an amazing moment. So it wasn't even all about that. Like the main event was unbelievable. The story is unbelievable. But it was such a stacked card. You know, my girl Bayley winning the title. Like it was a great event. And I think that it's a wild statement. I think they're in a stronger place than what they were with the Attitude Era. I'm not saying it's better, but they're in a stronger place with more. I think if we were to count them all, more stars, more genuine top tier stars. Like, as you said, CM Punk had a minor role, which proved to be a major thing. He's one of the biggest stars in the world.
It was just one of those weekends where you often read about, Sam, how businesses who end up becoming these super big things, whether it's like a Netflix or something else, that they can sometimes just fall into it by way of luck, and they can fail upwards. And the way that the Cody Crybabies really responded to be responsible for one of the greatest quarterly periods of storytelling that we've ever seen. Now, I actually think that if your plan was to always have Rock and Roman as that big match there, then The Rock has to win the Royal Rumble. He can't not win the Royal Rumble, because it will just never be accepted that a person who won the Royal Rumble gets shafted out of that opportunity. But we would never go for that as fans, whether that was Cody Rhodes or CM Punk. We would never have allowed The Rock to overstep anyone who had run the Royal Rumble. So if that was always the plan, the one thing that I think the WWE might have stuffed up is that if you want Rock and Roman, you have to have The Rock win the Royal Rumble. But they didn't do that. They went with Cody, and that is what obviously triggered this whole backlash to it, which again doesn't really matter now, because what we ended up getting was what has always been, and The Rock has probably been one of my most favorite athletes of all time. But he has always been his best, and he is the best version of himself as a heel. I liked him as Rocky Maivia. I loved him as the Nation of Domination Rock. I liked him as a pre-corporation version of the Rock, but I loved him as the corporate Rock. So liked him again when he went through the silk shirt phase out of that one, but loved him more as Hollywood Rock, embracing the thing of him. I think he is his more authentic, natural self when he's playing a heel. And what we got out of him the last few months, with all due respect to everyone else on the roster, was just the ingredients that you needed to escalate things to another level.
Yeah, he definitely was not going through the motions at all. He was smart about it. He could have put his foot down and said, no, I'm going to face my cousin, and that's going to be the main event. He didn't. The other bit that I love, and I say this to other people as well, is I love the business side of it. I've always been a business guy when it comes to this stuff. So I love, and I read up about it, I watch docos, I love the business side. And the fact that they had such a turbulent year and a half, probably a year, with not the originator of the company, but the main man in charge, Vince McMahon, who was the genius behind it all after he took over his dad. The trouble he's gotten himself into, and you can go read about it, don't really want to talk about it, but some really, if it's all true, despicable criminal activity as recent as the past year and a half. The fact that he finally was able to be removed, and it took, unfortunately, such horrible things, he's finally been removed from the company. His son-in-law comes in, who's already a legend of the company, Triple H. And we kind of have a feeling he knows how to run this. He's a lifer. He knows what to do. He showed it with NXT. He's shown it through various points of his retirement. And he's got a great crew to work with. Don't get me wrong. Like, the talent is unbelievable. But for him to have this vision and to have it already peaking after a year, less than a year in charge. And that's why this weekend they finally let him, or made him maybe, take the spotlight. And people are talking about it's the Triple H era and that kind of thing. And he's sort of like trying to shirk that a little bit, but it is. I love that storyline. I love the fact that his son-in-law came in to save the day. But not only saved the day, they're literally breaking every record they've ever held, financially, attendance, etc. His wife, the daughter of the bad guy, left the company through shame of what her dad did, and perhaps she knew about it. I don't know. I don't want to get into that stuff. She makes a return on the weekend, which has feel good elements to it as well. I'm less jazzed by that, but whatever. It's all good. But the fact that her husband, Triple H, in real life is running the show with some other great minds, including The Rock, who, if we haven't said it, is a genuine board of director now. So he kind of has a say in what's going on. That's an amazing part of the story for me. I love that part of it. And he's brought it back. They're allowed to say professional wrestling. If you listen to the commentary, Jards, even though Michael Cole made a big fuss about that and it was kind of over the top, their commentary now is very spur of the moment, ad lib. It's funny. It's less cliched. It's interesting and entertaining. The whole company is just, they've had this weight taken off them. And I love it.
It's a magical time to be aware of wrestling. Like it's fun. And it's fun. I often say to people, because inevitably you end up running into someone who will say to you, "Oh, all this is just fake, right?" And my response to that will kind of sometimes be, "Oh, you mean like a musical, right? Or you mean like a Marvel movie, right? Like these are all things that we acknowledge are performances." But this particular form of performance is one for people who love gladiator type stuff, gladiator type entertainment. So that part, I think we've kind of pushed through now, and it's just so much more mainstream. And to your point that you raised before, I thought it was really interesting that they made a point of really emphasizing that this is a new era. You had Triple H on night 1 of WrestleMania come out and say, "Welcome to a new era." You had Stephanie on night 2 come out and say, "Welcome to the Paul Levesque or the Triple H era." You had Cody on Raw just saying, "Welcome to this new era." So like everyone is working really hard to just remove the person that you were talking about earlier from the dialogue here. And I think the TKO group, who now own the WWE, are pretty keen to push that as well. So I thought they did a decent job of saying, we're in a new era, this is something new, without ever mentioning why they had to emphasize that. So I was impressed by that. And I do think that we probably are just now, I wonder, I still have to process where do you go from here, because the storytelling was just so good. And this comes on the back of what I thought was the best wrestling story in a very long time, possibly ever, with the Bloodline.
It definitely was.
This was the crown jewel in that Bloodline story, and that's now all kind of wrapped up. So Triple H has got a lot on his plate to do now, like to try and up where you go from here. It is going to be a tall order, but this was probably one of those months, one of those weeks where those who had stayed true to the code and true to the art of professional wrestling probably felt a little bit validated in who they were and what they were doing more this weekend than maybe they ever have before.
Jardian, we got to wind up. We could talk about pro wrestling all night, but we got to get going. I do want to say there is breaking news, and for those who have stuck around, this is worth sticking around for. Our part-time colleague Dave Riccio has sent me a text, and he said you must mention this on the pod, and we'll discuss this further in the next few episodes. There is some random bloke claiming to be Doco. So what that means in real terms is there's someone on Wikipedia claiming to be Jonathan Docking. Jonathan Docking, Australian rugby league player, got some stats, some birthdays which look legit, etc. Some pictures of him playing for the Sharks. The main picture is some other guy who is clearly not Jonathan Docking. I don't think you can see this, Jards, on the video. If you can, yeah, that guy. Look at that, everyone watching on the YouTube. That's not Jonathan Docking, and we're going to get to the bottom of this.
That's AI Jonathan Docking. That's ChatGPT's.
Not even. We're going to get out of here. Jardian, thank you so much, WiseMan, for your time. Appreciate you. Love you. We will talk to you soon. I'll be seeing you soon as well, I got a feeling. And thanks to everyone who stuck around for 20 minutes of squared circle chat. Appreciate you. SharkCast Pod episodes coming soon, but until we get there, have a great day, night, whatever you're doing. Appreciate you listening. Up, Cronulla Jards. We'll talk to you soon, my friend.